Bitcoin is often said to be backed by energy, and by that people mean that the mining computers sacrifice energy in order to secure the network and find the next block, and thereby be paid in Bitcoin for doing so by the users, right? So my latest shtick, if you will, or stick, is it shtick or stick?
Actually, it's shtick. Shtick. You got it right.
Shtick, right? It's not backed by energy, it's backed by human action, because behind all those ASICs is always a human actor choosing to buy them and choosing to run the software and choosing to plug them in and do the thing. So everything in Bitcoin requires a human being to act. It does nothing by itself. It still needs human beings acting on incentives to function. And the funny thing is, when you really boil that idea down to what it actually means, it's like it's just an agreement on a fixed set of rules. And the reason we agree on these rules is that these rules we see. By understanding the system, we can tell that these rules are more expensive to try to cheat than to follow. If we just follow the rules, it's more profitable for us than to try to cheat them. And if we do, we can get this finite number, which you can divide everything by. And you get into this wonderful world of hyper-Bitcoinization. That's at least in the back of your head when you imagine what the future might hold. And then you think, holy shit, and then you just follow along. And if you think about all the machines and all the physics that are involved in Bitcoin and all the mathematics, all of that is just extensions of our minds, really. All the ASICs are doing they're speeding up the rate of calculation that we can do with our heads. Because running the code is just solving the equation and doing a hash. Like, you might as well do it by hand. It will take you a lot more time, and it won't be very efficient. But at the end of the day, the ASIC is just a fancy abacus. So that's a lot of what I talk about these days, and how everything in Bitcoin is just information, which means that it's just us, and all the computers used in it are just tools to make us better. But Bitcoin itself, it's not like other things on computers, which may or may not be us, but Bitcoin is definitely us, because it's us agreeing on a fixed set of rules, and it's totally voluntary. So Bitcoin is the Bitcoiners, the way I see it. What do you say to that?
I think this comes back to maybe your prior question around being an Austrian or knowing much about Austrian economics. Like, I think some of the language around human action and this kind of stuff is that I'm not trying to disagree or say it's wrong or anything. I think I understand those words in the way you mean them. It sort of makes sense to me. But the language that I choose to use to describe, I think, the same idea is it's just markets, right? And I don't believe that Bitcoin is made of energy, even though I think I've said things like that, like, either earlier in my life or while drinking or whatever. It's a poetic way to think about it.
Digital like energy and all. Yeah.
Yeah. It's much like your t-shirt, this slogan. It's a little bit of a metaphor, right? Like, I think if I want to be more precise, I would say that Bitcoin is sold for energy. And that doesn't mean that it is energy, right? That's a very different statement. Just because something is exchanged for something doesn't make it that thing. And so I think Bitcoin is a market in which we exchange energy for Bitcoin.
Oh, you mean it's bought for energy, right?
Yeah. And of course, an exchange can be looked at as a buy or a sell, depending on which asset you think.
Yeah. But I mean, the process of mining is really buying Bitcoins for energy, in a way, since you sacrifice energy to get the Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's from the miner's perspective. I would say that you are buying the Bitcoin with this energy. And I would say from the network's perspective, they are selling the Bitcoin for that energy.
Yeah, which implies the somewhat vulgar word monetary energy, which is like this cross between physics and praxeology that they don't really mix.
Yeah, it's a metaphor, and that's fine. Yeah, that's not a real thing. Like, it's just, there's actual energy. And the real energy is used to make, and if you would like, the human choices that go into that decision, like, someone has to make the choice to use that energy to create hash rate, and then they sell that hash rate for Bitcoin. And so sometimes I think about, like, Bitcoin uses energy to, like, it doesn't really even use energy. People use energy to buy Bitcoin. And that's just a market phenomenon. And it's so much of what we find compelling about Bitcoin, in my view, and so many of its strengths. I think perhaps you would agree with this corollary to your earlier statement, is like, because of the freedom or the human action, or in my words, the market that underlies Bitcoin, that's really what creates the properties we want. So the uncensorability, the robustness, the scalability, like these all come from the fact that like someone is being paid to provide this service, and the mechanism of paying them is robust and hard to stop. And so the market is just hard to stop and grows tremendously quickly. It has no barriers to entry, no regulations other than the very simple, clear regulations that exist in the code base. Right? Those are part of the contract, if you like, of the market and how it must build and settle goods. So like there are regulations. They're just not regulations that are like, by fiat in a parliamentary or legislative machine, right? They're just sitting there in the code, and everyone has these really strong protections, and the barriers to entry are extremely low and the rewards are real. And so it grows tremendously quickly. And that's an amazing thing. And I think that I also, like my shtick, if you like, right now is, we need to stop thinking about blockchains and technology and anything that Dhruv, found interesting in 2011 about Bitcoin. Like that's not the point. Like we need to think about the economic incentives and the markets, and we need to think, how do we build markets to do other things that are as robust as the market we have at layer one that allows Bitcoin to operate? And of course, that market is going to have to use Bitcoin because the strength of the currency is going to help define the strength of those incentives. And for me, a lot of the discourse that Bitcoiners and altcoiners are sort of having in between them is like they're talking across purposes, right? Like altcoiners have decided the blockchain is the thing that matters, and they want to invest in the technology of the blockchain and making it more capable and da 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 da. And of course leads to centralization because not really thinking about it as a market. Whereas Bitcoiners, I hope, are more thinking about it as a market because frankly, their blockchain is not a very powerful one from a computing perspective. A Bitcoin blockchain can't do certain things that other people's blockchains can. And so we're actually protecting ourselves from a whole swath of bad ideas. And we're forced into, therefore, thinking about things like layer two, right? Which are separate. They're not a block, like Lightning is not a blockchain in any way. It's just a peer-to-peer application that offers market incentives to use Bitcoin to solve certain problems for other Bitcoiners. That's a very healthy way, I think, to engineer solutions to problems using Bitcoin.
Yes, we agree completely. And this is also why we don't use the term altcoins here on the Freedom Footprint Show. We use the term what we in Spain would call monedas de mierda or something.
Gotcha.
Yes, exactly.